My name is Karina Sams, and I did my project on Bruce Davidson. Most of my pictures are compassionate, gentle, and personal. They tend to let the viewer see for himself. They tend not to preach, and they tend not to pose as art. I really like this quote by Bruce Davidson because it really embodies what kind of an artist he really was, what kind of photographer he brought out. He was very personal with all of his subjects. He got to know them before he taking their pictures, and I think this definitely shows the exact kind of photographer that he was. Bruce Davidson was born on September 5th, 1933 in Illinois and is still living. At age 10, his mother made a darkroom for him in the basement of their house, and he began to take his first photographs. He attended the Kodak National High School and then went on to Rochester Institute of Technology and finished schooling at Yale University. He was then drafted into the Army in 1953 and was stationed in Fort Huachuca in Arizona, and then later moved to Paris where he finished his service in 1957. After leaving the military, he was fairly poor and did freelance photography for income for a few years, but then later sustained this living on photography after that and created some of his most famous work between 1958 and 1961 while working for Magnum and Life magazine. Since 1980, Bruce Davidson began working as a photographer, shooting mostly urban life and landscapes of Los Angeles, but plans to continue to do this by saying, "I work in the foothills of Los Angeles, where it can get strange, especially at night. I recently came upon a sign that said, 'Beware of coyotes, rattlesnakes, and the occasional mountain lion.' There's a strange intensity about that place that I like." When Bruce was 10 years old, he started taking photographs of his basement, and 70 years later, Bruce recalled that moment and said, "What happened in that dark, dank basement in Illinois was a revelation." He started to get his photographs recognized when he was attending Kodak National High School and received an award for taking first place in a photograph contest. This talent kind of stuck with him when he moved on to college, and while attending Yale University, he focused his thesis statement on recording the football players' emotions when they're not playing the game, rather than when they are, through photographs. And this thesis was found and published by Life magazine later in 1955, throwing Bruce Davidson kind of into the photographic limelight at that point. While Bruce was in the military, he was serving a duty in Paris, and while he was there, he was introduced to Henri Cartier-Bresson, and showed him his portfolio and was kind of asking him for advice and see what he could get out of him to help make his photographs better. And then when he took this advice given to him, he started a freelance photography towards the end of his military service and then on after that in 1957. And then because of that, later joined Magnum in 1958 using the same strategies that Bresson had showed him because it kind of sparked his interest, and that's what made him join Magnum. Starting in 1961, for 4 years, most of his famous work that's known around the world was created, including The Dwarf, Brooklyn Gang, and The Freedom Riders, and some other ones as well. That's just a few. Also during this time, Bruce Davidson was awarded the Guggenheim Grant, which gave him the huge opportunity to go create even more famous work, such as The Time of Change, which documented the civil rights movement in the United States. He said about his civil rights work, "I was close up and I was quick. I had to be, just to stay one step ahead of being arrested. All the time I was witnessing that struggle. I felt I was part of something, not apart from it. That's always the instinct, and I think it has served me well." His next published work was just as controversial, being the East 100th Street, showing what is known as the inner city ghetto in an intimate form. He was showing poverty and housing discrimination, but soon after this he published The Subway in 1970 and then Central Park in 1990, and all of these were featured in the Museum of Modern Art, or MoMA. He later ended up returning back to East 100th Street in 1998 to document the changes since he had last photographed it, and he said it was changed for the better. He says, "I went back years later to photograph the positive changes, and a woman who had been an activist there in the 1970s told me that when the people in the power saw the book, heads rolled. It caused a shakeup, and the good effects filtered down to the community. This particular work gave him another award from the Open Society Institute, and that gave him the Open Society Institute Fellowship Award. Many know Bruce for his famous works that he published in 2008 in the portraiture world, though. He photographed tons of celebrities, such as Marilyn Monroe, Kiki Smith, Andy Warhol, and many, many more. And this kind of rounded out to 2011 when Sony recognized him for his portraiture work and awarded him the Sony World Photography Award. Nowadays, Bruce Davidson photographs landscapes and has been particularly drawn to the suburban hinterlands of Los Angeles, kind of where the city blends into the wilderness. He promises to stay with this until he gets the perfect photograph and explains the perfect photograph as being almost subliminal. He says, "When I was a kid, I played baseball, and you heard the sound the bat made when it really connected with the ball. You knew you had a great hit. It's the same thing with photography. Sometimes you hear that click and the shutter, and you know you've caught something really special." The first two photographs are from the dwarf. He's very personal. He stayed with the circus while taking these photographs and really involved himself with the subjects' personal lives while he was taking these. And notice he said that it was really sad and very intimate between them. The next three photographs are from his work, The Brooklyn Gang. He was just as personal and close up with these subjects as well, taking on their most intimate moments, as you can see in this photograph. Here's another one from The Brooklyn Gang. And then these next three photographs are his portraiture work with the celebrities. These ones in particular are featuring Marilyn Monroe and Simone Signoret as his subjects. Like I said, his work is very personal. He gets very close to them in their daily lives, just taking these pictures. Okay, so during this time with Magnum, he turned his camera to familiar military and government thresholds. As I told you, he was doing Magnum while he was interchanging out of the military into his own freelance photography. And it was kind of his comfort zone being able to take these photographs. And he was also using a lot of the techniques that Bresson had shown him. His civil rights work featured Martin Luther King. This one was impeccable. The composition in this photograph is just amazing. And here's another one where he's got the bus in the background over here. And then the next photograph will actually show what's on the bus, which is right here. And it's showing the soldiers on the bus protecting the riders from actually being hurt by the people outside, the rioters on the outside trying to get in. And the last three photographs are of his landscape work that he did in New York in 1963, which later inspired him to go back and do landscape photography again, which he's doing right now currently, towards the older he's getting. I guess he's 73 right now. Okay, so the significance, just to recap the important awards and recognition in his career, started with this thesis that he published of the football players and their emotions in Life magazine when they recognized it, leading him to become a full-time member of Magnum after meeting Henri Cartier-Bresson, from which he later published his most famous works within a 4-year period, including The Dwarf, Brooklyn Gang, Freedom Writers, and then later received a grant from the Guggenheim and created The Time of Change, which gave him a one-man showing in MoMA as well. And this kind of also led into part of his award that he got for the East 100th Street in 1970, where he did the documentary of the ghetto and the poverty, which rounded to the end of his published work that he's had so far in 2008 and 2011 for his celebrity portraiture and when he won the Sony World Photography Award. And this ends my presentation. Thank you.